right, we're live, so I'm hoping audio is good on the test. So I hope it's good now. How's it going? How's it going, man?
It's going. It's going. How about you?
Doing well, busy, which is a good thing. We were talking about that before the show. It's good to be busy. Good to be reacquainting ourselves with our contacts, and the industry's going in some interesting directions. Let us know out in the chat if our audio levels are good, if we're too low, too loud, so we'll get those adjusted just before we get into the actual show time. Um, yeah, I gotta refigure out my schedule because I work 7 days a week now.
Right, right.
So yeah, I've got to gotta balance that as new things come up and so forth. But outside of that, looks like the chat says we're all good. So
Okay.
let's get into it today. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts, both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is the Wicked Fanboy, aka Jim. So happy to have you here, sir. We had a couple of hiccups getting you on, but we finally managed to do it.
Yes,
You're here.
we did. We did. Took 3 tries, but we're here, and hopefully I'll be invited back for another. Alrighty.
That's the plan. But I'm happy to have you here. We got an interesting screenplay this week. Um,
Definitely is.
it's through sheer happenstance. I did not plan this. It basically kind of overlaps with the movie that came out just last week, with regards to the subject matter, but from a very different perspective. And then it has a very artistic aspect to it. If you're familiar with, if you read the title on the thumbnail and how it's in the description, Guernica is a Picasso piece about his expressions going on in the political sphere at that time. And I was really hoping, even despite the log line, that we'd actually get into some legit fun history of art with this script. But
As far,
unfortunately,
yeah,
it was more of a bait and switch in
exactly.
one measure. So let's share some details with that. And Jim, you said you wanted to read the synopsis, so we'll gear that up in just a second. So this week we are reviewing Love and War and Guernica. It's from last year's Blacklist, the 2023 Blacklist, placing 22nd out of all the scripts with 14 votes. Is written by Sam Zvibelman, who, if you are familiar with that name, from Hulu, he did the show Pen 15. He's worked with Bob Odenkirk with his production company. Uh, the interesting aspect about this is that his log line is multiple sentences, which is actually a synopsis. And he didn't have a log line, so I had to write one for him because he did not follow any of the rules. So the log line is as follows: an indie journalist suffering from writer's block is recruited by the Union Army to deliver a message deep in enemy territory where he will face the reality of love, war, and artistic expression. Jim, give us the synopsis, which this writer thought was a log line.
Alrighty, the synopsis goes as follows. Against the backdrop of a present day war torn America, Love and War and Guernica is a dark comedy about Neil Mudd, a reporter for the Union who is suffering from writer's block ever since his breakup, and is engaging with a mysterious horse following him through war torn Las Vegas, California. When the Union recruits Neil for a top secret mission, he and the horse go on an epic journey that emotionally serves as a metaphor for war, or the war that is going on inside Neil's head.
Yeah, that doesn't sound pretentious at all, does it?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. Of course not.
So, Jim, please, since you're new to the show this week, and I want to get have the audience get to know you a little bit more, please share your initial thoughts of this screenplay, Love, War, and Guernica.
Well, it's definitely interesting. It was an entertaining read, albeit a little bit confusing and kind of it's out there, definitely way out there somewhere. Um, it's very tight. It's a fast read. Um, some of it works, a lot of it doesn't. Um, as script was saying, before the show here and before discussing this, it has some comparison to a film that just came out recently that's in the theaters from A24, I believe it is.
Yep.
And but very little, for only one point about it that it has a connection with, basically, and it's interesting. And we will continue to get deeper into it and a few plot points and characters and so on as we chat.
Yeah, the overall premise, similar to the Civil War movie from A24, is that there is a civil war. The contents regarding the details of it are a little vague, but they do kind of get actually a little bit more understanding of the sides of each side of this war. It's between the Union, which is the United States, and then what's called the Founders. So this is a separate group that believe in
Hmm.
or claim to believe in the Constitution.
Correct.
And what's interesting is that this war has been going on for around 90 days, and somehow California has managed to stay out of it because they are a more self sufficient state, as the writer has claimed, with regards to their access to ports, their farming,
Correct.
all that other stuff. But now the war has kind of made its way into California and around the Glendale area, and I believe parts of what was it,
Fellas.
Las Feliz, thank you. So, and that's where our story starts off with our character Neil, who
Mhm.
is your cliche vice-inducing writer for
Correct.
a newspaper, whether it's an indie publication or your major one. All I have to say is that if his apartment's a mess, everyone out there listening could probably imagine what that would probably look like, and you would not be
Yeah.
far off.
Correct. A disaster area. Yes, of course. Yes, a guy who's suffering from writer's block and something else going on between his ears there. But as we speak here a little bit further with the script, we'll get into that portion as well. So, but yeah, he definitely has a lot of things going on there, and they're all between his ears, and he's trying to figure them all out. So,
Oh yeah, this is a character that's very much stuck in its head. Um,
mhm.
the writer has a lot of editorializing in his own screenplay. He's definitely writing a little bit more for the reader than he is writing the actual story, because he does talk to the reader. He
Yeah,
has something like reader's notes. He has there's music playing at this point. He doesn't reference many songs. In fact, he only references one song. Um,
mhm.
and it's supposed to be done in a comedic fashion. I think it's okay.
Yeah,
uh,
it is. It's done well.
but yeah, you've got there's a very LA mindset mentality throughout the narration of this story, and one of the things that this does, I know it doesn't work well often, but it's something a lot of writers do, and that is voiceover narration and flashbacks. They're peppered throughout this entire script. It is done in a sense of being sort of like a Mobius strip of storytelling of sorts.
Hmm.
And I think that's as far as I'll elaborate on that without spoiling it, because again, we always encourage all our listeners, all our watchers, that if our conversation about this screenplay intrigues you, to seek it out, read it for yourself, come to your own conclusions, share those conclusions with us. We'll always be happy to talk about them. But yeah, we're not going to spoil the ending, but we are going to talk about the characters, motivations, their plots, and so forth here. Neil is in sulk mode. He doesn't care. he's
Correct.
he's been broken up for a few months now. He's living in squalor. He hasn't written anything. He hasn't been published. His friend and boss, Jacob, who's the editor of the paper they're on, which is called The Lead,
Hmm.
is begging him to come in, write him 500 words. There's a running joke about how he's got writer's block during wartime, which is actually kind of funny, because any journalist should have lots to say when there's a war going on. And here's one that has nothing. So I
Exactly.
appreciated that. I thought, okay, this is kind of going in that direction.
Hmm.
Uh, what were your thoughts about some of the film references in the early pages of the script, Jim, that this writer put in?
Well, he brings up quite a few. Considering some of the characters or characterizations of particular people in the script, uh, they were interesting. They were intriguing. without getting into it too much, he should have used a little bit more originality instead of kind of like throwing little references to films and past films in the film in his script, and incorporating certain things in there as well. So he should have left that will alone. It just concentrated on the one story. I can see why he would bring something like that up in his script, as to for anybody who would happen to sit down and read it, maybe they would find a connection with some of these references that were made. But other than that, it all depends on the interpretation of the reader of the script. I mean, and I saw them as being useless, but
Me too,
but somebody
because
else might actually say it.
well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is refreshing as an audience member, whether I'm reading a script or watching a movie, is when they do something subtle, but it triggers a revelation in your mind. Whereas like, oh, they're pulling from this, oh, they're doing an homage to that, and it's a very, very abstract homage. It's not like a ball-faced one, kind of like what a parody would do, where it's just like, oh, we are doing a scene from this movie, like Dirty Dancing, we're making fun of that, or the Matrix bullet time thing, we're making fun of that. I would have much preferred something a bit more, you know, with good comedy, they don't have to go that route. And if you're dealing with something with satire, which this script is kind of trying to frame itself as, you don't need to go right away. But right off the bat, they reference Apocalypse Now and Star Wars. And I was like, okay, you basically just told me we're going to be seeing some sort of, we're seeing your influences now, way too obviously. So now we're going to get that framed. And I always look at this as kind of like a really cheesy tactic of appealing to like the lowest common denominator of readers. Like this will get you past your first round of screeners, because it's like, oh, I love Apocalypse Now. Oh, I love Star Wars. Okay, I'm going to now imprint those movies onto this script and not actually see the script for what it is. And here I am thinking, like, as I was reading this, I'm thinking, man, you know what product did a great homage and parody of Apocalypse Now that doesn't get enough credit these days? That's an Animaniacs cartoon, where the whole premise was, the three Warner brothers and the sister Dot had to go across the studio lot to stop a director who's been spending too much money on a comedy, and the director's basically a Jerry Lewis like thing.
Right.
And here, what we have here, after 20 odd pages of setting up this little neighborhood and where Neil works, we finally get the inciting incident. Oops, hit my mic. Inciting incident of basically, yeah, we're going to send this journalist who hasn't been published in 3 months into enemy territory to deliver a message that's vital to the war effort. And the reason they're able to do this is because he's not protected by the press anymore, because he hasn't written anything in a while. So everybody's kind of being conscripted. I think some of the humor where the Union Army, which is I would suggest is a California-centric mentality, they each call themselves comrades, which I thought is funny because that's a very communistic term.
Exactly. There were a few references to that in the script itself. Yeah.
And then you have a couple of celebrities that pop up that have military rank, and there's also a song which I think the song comes far too late, because there's references to it, but we don't know what it is yet. And this is a song about Sean Penn coming to get you to join the war effort. And then we've got Jane Fonda as a general who is there to basically deliver the exposition of the mission. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking contextually this could be funny, especially if it's played straight. But I felt it's coming a little bit too late, because we haven't established that this is the tone of the story yet. Because up until this point, Neil he's living in squalor. He's got Exabia, his cleaning lady, who stops by with oranges to clean his apartment, but he's like, no, everything's good. You don't come up here. Have fun on your day off, or do whatever. And then he's got his friend who's the barista that knows how to make his coffee that he gets every day before he goes to work. And then his publication is actually in the basement of another store that you have to get through there through like a trap door or a hidden entrance. And it's like, okay, it's an underground rag, so okay, we got little top secret nods here.
Yeah.
But it's like we're getting all of this exposition, but we're spinning our wheels over the point that he's got writer's block. He's hung up on this girl, Emma, who is now the poster child for the Union effort in the war.
Exactly.
And it's actually funnier to explain than it is on the actual page, sadly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As I was reading it, I chuckled at, especially the Martin Sheen reference to Apocalypse Now, and
Hmm.
as it went further with Barista Bray, his friend there at the coffee shop, and that was always interesting. That was something that I like Barista Bray. I actually like that particular character, and I like Jacob. These are very interesting people that I mean, in short sentences, he created characters basically, and he defined them very clearly and very quickly. He didn't have to go too deep into detail, and he basically brought them to life in the script, pretty much like Neil. We know Neil already here from the first page on the way out, so he did a pretty good job doing that, creating his characters and moving the story along. And then yeah, the adding of Sean Penn, which I thought was kind of goofy, and Jane Fonda of all things, for crying out loud, throwing her in there as a general. But okay, I would see that maybe if you wanted to go that far into satire. Okay, that's
I mean,
great.
she's a little old to be holding rank in the
Yeah, no
military.
kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say this: the
And,
one character that he did fail to do well was Stacy, because she actually has a monologue that describes who her character is. Like, she has to tell the audience who she is, which is that she's a black, somewhat bisexual fellow writer at the paper. And I'm like,
mm,
why even tell us the bisexual part when you're not showing us anything bisexual about her? There doesn't seem to hold, like this. She's only in two scenes in the entire script. And so,
mm,
and the other part too is the monologue isn't even funny. Like, it doesn't have that
right,
aspect where it's like, oh, I'm making fun of the fact that I am all of these diversity check boxes or what have you. It doesn't go there. It actually plays it a little too straight for my liking.
mm,
Um, and even the joke where Neil looks at her and says, "Wait a minute, you're black." That didn't land as well as I thought it could. Uh, so
no,
so yeah, there was some. I mean, that was the one flaw. I think definitely Jacob was far easier because there was the conversations that they had were very motivated by the fact that Jacob just wants Neil to write something for his paper, but there's multiple.
right,
He has multiple reasons to do so. The first one is that he needs to meet his deadline. The second one is that if he
correct,
publishes Neil, he doesn't have to worry about being conscripted by the Union Army because the press
correct.
pass will protect him.
Yes,
But Neil doesn't
definitely.
care, and Neil can't do that. And what ends
Yeah,
up
and he still
happening?
ends up. Yeah, he still ends up getting recruited by the Union anyhow to go on that secret mission.
Secret mission where whatever he delivers, we don't know. We have no idea what he's delivering. It's just an
Correct.
important piece, but he does talk about how that's his a weird, morbid fantasy he has of fighting his way through the front lines to deliver his manuscript or whatever he's been writing, chronicling this war. And now that it's finally here, he's got no ambition to do it. And
Correct.
it's okay. I think. I mean, I'm like, okay, I appreciate it. You're presenting some irony. I'm wishing we got a little bit more to it. Like in this case here, it feels like he started this story far too late into what was going on in it, and I think some of the flashbacks kind of padded out that bit a bit more than what was needed, because I'd rather have, say, a commentary between him and Emma over the possible political divide that's on the looming, and him saying
Right.
like, "Listen, I don't want a war, but if we go to one, I'll be there on the front lines reporting it and everything." And then you jump 90 days into the future, and now here we are, where he's not reporting on it. We're seeing the irony of the fact. We're seeing maybe more of his character of him being a coward, or maybe
Mm,
when push came to shove, Emma's the one that joined the army and he's the one that stayed behind. So they did a reversal flip, just something to kind of really frame this so that when he's challenged on the fact that he's a reporter and he should be reporting on this, we get a better sense as to why he's in a state of arrested development.
correct.
Because
Yeah.
it
And
just felt
there's.
kind of lacking. I mean, I'm like, okay, it's
Yeah.
on the surface level. I get it.
Mhm.
But I need to get, I mean, I just think for myself as an audience member, I need to kind of get a little bit more of a deeper hook. What about yourself? What am I off base here? Did you get a little bit more than I?
No, I got exactly what you got. Yeah, there needs to be something of a deeper hook. Uh, a little more dialogue. I mean, if they were going to go into the flashbacks a little bit more, and it would explain Emma and her character a little bit better
Sure.
than what he did in the script within the story, because it was obviously it was a relationship, and they had a long lasting relationship for a few years. And nothing about their political affiliations was brought up. Nothing about, what is going on here prior to this. I mean, nothing at all was explained or put out there. And the reason why Emma was made the poster child in the first place is never explained either. I guess they're just using her to say, hey, here's this young lady, beautiful young woman. We're going to use her as a poster child for this to promote the war and push this out there. And then the other connection that kind of lost me, the introduction of the horse. Uh, when
Yeah.
if anybody should pick the script up, if you go to the blacklist and you want to check this thing out, the PDF file is there, obviously, for you to get it. Um, I understand the horse and the potential connection that animals and humans have, but it is so it's out there in Goonie Google Land. Before the stream started, I mentioned Goonie Google Land, but the horse coming in and following him around for some reason, and ultimately becoming part of this long journey that's going on here between Neil and Emma and the horse and everybody else that's involved, just kind of throws everything off place and off kilter, and it becomes a journey, but something that goes way off into outer space somewhere, and it comes off like a really bad LSD when you're coming down off of a drug or anything like that.
Yeah.
You're having a nightmare or a dream, or you're seeing things and stuff like that. That seems exactly what it ends up like, and it just feels that way. It's just for some reason it didn't mesh. It didn't mesh. It's comical. And it's interesting to read, and the connection that the horse has with Neil,
It's
I don't know
perplexing.
about.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's perplexing. Yeah, you're trying to figure this one out here, but okay. But as we go further along in the script, we'll find out supposedly from an old friend of Neil's, somebody that he knew a long time ago when he was a child.
Yeah, there's some sort of connection
There's some
there.
sort of connection,
I
and the
will
horse.
say,
Yeah,
yeah,
the horse was attuned to him for some reason, from
s-
scent.
yeah, something like that. The horse has
Yeah,
somehow been um, grafted on to Neil, and very
Neil. Yeah.
conveniently so, because what's fascinating about the inciting incident that comes again, I remark it comes very late in the script, is
Yeah.
that he's got the highways are pretty much almost completely taken over by the founders.
Hmm.
So they're asking him to go on this mission, not necessarily by foot, but it's almost like they know he's got a horse at his disposal, and they're like, "Go across the country, not really across the country, but go upstate to Glendale, and drop
Exactly.
this off at a bookstore." And that's the mission, and the whole reason that we're here to talk to you about it is because Emma asked for you. Like, that's the thing. Like, the girl that got away has asked for him to do this, and and
Exactly.
and
And it's
that's
like it was almost predetermined for some reason that he was supposed to go on this journey, and the horse was supposed to accompany him, or take him on this journey.
yeah, it's a little puppet
So,
mastery,
yeah.
which it's a little off. Like, I think, I mean, if you
Yeah.
want to play into comedy, I would always argue, okay, he had writer's block. He finds out he's going to be conscripted if he doesn't get this thing in published. He writes a puff piece,
Right.
and then they conscript him, but he's like, no, I've written something. It's like, well, when it hasn't been published yet. Oh, damn, yeah, it goes to print tonight. So tomorrow it'll be published. Like, well, we're recruiting you now, so that's our loophole.
Mm.
I mean, that's the bureaucracy you're making fun of, especially when it deals with military and conscription. And I mean, I'm from Canada. We had a huge conscription process during the Second World War with Quebec, so I know a lot about that and a lot of the loopholes that were made, and even the efforts by politicians to try and stave that off. So, yeah, it's almost like it feels kind of like first draft ideas in some cases, and then there's some parts that feel like, okay, second, third draft refinements. This makes a little more of a poignant note here. But yeah, just the whole way to get this story kind of starting felt a little flat for me. And again, this is like a 96-page script. It's a quick read.
Mm.
Oddly enough, for myself, well, you maybe have been engaged. I found myself yawning a couple times while reading it. uh,
I was engaged a little bit in a few of the characters, especially
mhm.
Jacob and Barista Brie. I did like those particular characters. They kind of stood out as being just regular Joes that are caught up in a situation.
Oh yeah, I like
Uh,
the fact that she felt like she was the only one still working a regular job, and everybody else was kind of at war at this point. And her
and she
knowledge of
was
coffee was funny. Yep.
in her legitimate connection with Neil,
Hmm.
outside of say this Emma character, this ex of his that is still got him perplexed, is that Barista Bree seems like she would be something or somebody that he might want to actually make a connection with and just kind of blow Emma off because obviously, that didn't go anywhere. She took off for a reason.
Hmm.
And she hit the road, she pounded the pavement, she kicked rocks, and she took off for a reason. Now, I mean, this sending us off in many different areas. I figured, okay, maybe him and Burst Debris were gonna like hook up, or they would kind of make that kind of connection, which never actually happens. But something down the road here does in the screenplay, as we talk on about it. And Jacob, his friend, obviously his boss, there's an even interesting connection between those two there, and something that they share as well. And that was a little bit more interesting than any of the journey that Neil and the horse go on to go search out and find Emma when he goes on his mission. That was more interesting, the characters and the camaraderie between the three people in particular. That was more interesting to me than any of the journey that took place in, say, the second act at all. Just those characters alone actually kind of built a little bit of something that I connected to in the script. Outside of that, bupkis. It just kind of flowed and it just kept on flowing. That's why it was such a fast read, and it was constructed. So I think, because as I was reading it, I mean, within 2 hours I had the thing finished, and I need 96-page script, and it kind of banged out and whizzed on by because a lot of it you can just kind of blow off as you're reading it. I mean, you go through it like about 2 or 3 times,
Hmm.
and a lot of it you just okay, we don't need that part here, but I'm just going to go to this other part that I remember that I liked a little bit, and it stood out a little bit better. So you just kind of breeze through that script a lot faster that way. But I mean, it's the way it's constructed. It's well written. But the thing is that a lot of the subplot and a lot of the situations here just don't add up. It just does not work for this particular story, and
I
it
think
just
there's a conflict of ideas going on here. Like that's probably
yeah.
the best way I could bring it up is okay, we got a Heart of Darkness journey story to get from one point to another. And basically, I mean, Heart of Darkness is essentially to deliver a message to this, general to be like, you're done.
Right.
and then, pull out, come back, we're good. In this case here is
Exactly.
deliver a message, don't know what it's for, don't know what it's pertaining to. It's of utmost importance, and he's on a loan. He's happens to have a horse that likes him for some reason
Hmm.
to help him get there. I do think the conversations between Neil and Jacob when Neil's going on this venture, and Jacob's like hands him the Bible, not the Bible, but oh, it's escaped me. I thought I wrote it down in my notes, but I didn't. But it's a religious text that his grandfather had when he escaped,
Hmm.
the
The Holocaust.
Holocaust, and he's like, this is for good luck because it saved him, and I want you to bring it back to me. And you're like,
Right.
well, this is a really good significance of the friendship.
Hmm.
And then we get some convoluted beats with that book. The first one is that as he's riding, it kind of pops out of the satchel on the horse, and he wants to go back and get it, but founding soldiers are making their way through, so now they have to wait. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is that according to the way that the script is framed, all of the founders are white people
Hmm.
and their children all the way up to like geriatrics.
Correct. Yes, all the way across the board, specifically with the father and his little boy who notices Neil
Yep.
hiding with the horse Guernica, as he names him.
As he tries to name it because he wants to have his
Yeah.
name up in the annals of history, like Kurt Vonnegut and Picasso and um,
Right.
a couple of other writers that are escaping me at the moment right now. But he wanted that accolade, but he did nothing to kind of solidify it.
Exactly. Hmm.
And for him, this story is this journey that he's telling is I guess the closest he's going to get.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, please regale us a little bit with your thoughts and this scene where the little boy, the little conscripted founder soldier, sees
The
sees
little
him in the book.
sees him in the book, or the distance between him and the book. Yeah.
Yep.
The little boy, he wants to stop and say something to his dad, but something is stopping him. His father kind of chastises him a little bit. You know, you're saying, "Come on, catch up with everybody else here. You got to be a good soldier," and blah blah blah, and all that other jazz. And I found it to be an interesting scene. I would suspect that Neil and the little boy make eye contact, and there is something that is said between that at some point. At least he gave a reference to that in the script. And the book, and the kid, with without even making any kind of emotion, is looking at Neil and just goes on along with his dad, like his dad's told him to. Come on, catch up with me. Let's keep on going here. And I found that to be a little bit of an interesting point. That's something that's good. That's in the script, actually. It kind of was a poignant portion here of very few poignant spots in the script, but it kind of stood out a little bit, and I thought that worked. His connection with another character that pops up within that same time frame, Creep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You liked Creepy a lot, so I want you to take lead on this, because I actually enjoyed a couple of aspects of him too.
Creep is a member of the Founders Army, the other portion of the so-called Civil War that's going on. And Creep is he is a little person, and he is in uniform. And Neil comes upon him, and they have guns drawn on each other, and I'm going to shoot you if you don't shoot me, so on, back and forth. There's constant going here, and suddenly they make a connection at some point during this, and they put their guns down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's over, I think, some sour cream and onion Pringles that Neil has in his knapsack and the horse bag on a horse. And they sit down and they have a conversation. And they start discussing each other's motivation, why they're doing this, why they're here, why they're fighting for each side. We find out that Creep is a member of the Founders' military...
kind of a marching band.
marching band, and he's missing his bow for his violin. It's a horsehair bow, by the way. And Neil explains his secret mission that he's going on, and that's what's going on and why he's going to see this particular woman that keeps on haunting him in his memories, this old love, this ex-girlfriend of his. And Creep and Neil have their discussions over this, and Creep wants to know exactly why. What's the point? What's motivating you to go see this woman, Emma? And he wants to make sure that he is deep into it and that he is motivated to go and actually complete his mission. And we hear a lot of context pertaining to this. And I did like that connection between him and Creep. What a hell of a name for a character, Creep. But but anyway, they made friends. And at some point later on in the script, that does come up again. And Creep kind of diverts the situation from happening, kind of offhand.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like that connection. They made friends, and between two sides, two warring factions there that were out and alone, having a chance to connect. And even though Creep had mentioned, if he had seen him somewhere else, he probably would have shot him dead. Same thing for Neil. And it was an interesting connection. I kind of liked Creep. Creep is fun, and that one song that you had brought up, that you had mentioned, comes up at that point, where Creep at some point down the road happens to sing the lyrics to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a whole bunch of visuals that are interconnected along with those lyrics being sung, and music cues that are also in the script, which I thought were interesting. I don't know what the reason for keeping those music cues in the script were in the first place, but okay. And all the beats were fine. I liked Creep. I would like to have seen more of Creep. I would like to have seen, where this goes with Creep as well. I found Creep to be more of an interesting character than Neil.
Yeah, because, Neil makes an interesting point, which is that why is Creep part of the Founders when we get from the perspective of Neil is that the Founders would actually reject a man like this because we get into the sense that the Founders are very homogenous. They don't like people of different types. They all want, and here's the other part that's actually really interesting. The founders want everyone to be the same. They want the equity at the end, and the union doesn't. But they're the ones that call
Yeah.
themselves comrades. So because he's saying like, well, the union would accept you for who you are, and Creep is like, yeah, but they would never tell me anything honestly to my face. And I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect. Like they treated him fully aware of his own drawbacks and failures, and even though there's a little bit of bullying to it, it's at least honest. Whereas on the union side of things, he got this type of subtextual context that he felt like he'd be living a lie on that side, and that's why he's fighting on the opposite side, and that gave Neil pause. And I think that's kind of where we get into the whole part where he offers him some Pringle chips if he's hungry, because he keeps on like, berating himself and doing push-ups, trying to, make up for his short stature, and then realizing like if he doesn't find his bowstring for the violin, they're going to kill him because that's the only thing he's good at.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's keeping him alive. And he finds out when Neil happens upon him, he hears him crying.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he was crying before he was doing those push-ups. So, obviously, mentally draining for this gentleman. And being that the founders seem to be kind of Aryan in nature, but yeah, him staying alive, just being a member of the marching band there, technically would be the only thing that would keep him alive. But I don't know, I just liked the idea is that he didn't like either side. He didn't want either side pandering to him. He wanted to exist on his own as his own character and by his own right.
Mm-hmm.
And being that musician and being that player in the band there, the marching band basically, gave him purpose. And he found purpose when being a member of the founders that way. And it was interesting to see that, and he took pride in it. He took pride in it, and that was a standout as far as his character was concerned. Because later on, like I mentioned, there's a portion in the script where we see him, and he's ready to go to war, so to speak.
Yeah, well, even shortly after that, while they're sleeping, he wakes up and he's ready to stab him, and then the horse kind of tips him off, and then he goes back and sleeps, and and then that's when Creep is the one that's telling Neil to wake up because his co-founders, so to speak, are on approach and they're going to kill him if he doesn't get a move on. And so he saves this guy's life, and before they separate, this was kind of interesting. The horse, which is now Guernica, has offered his part of his horsetail so that Creep could fashion a new bowstring for his violin.
Correct. Yeah, which was kind of weird, but okay.
It's like, this is a way more intelligent horse than you'd ever give credit to. I'm thinking on the production side of things, because the writer was very specific to made a note that this is not a CG horse. This is a real horse. And here I am thinking, man, wrangling a horse on a set to do all of these things comes with a hefty price tag.
It definitely
And I don't think it'd be worth it. I mean, you might as well just have an animatronic horse, or literally a guy in a suit that then gets CGI bumped up.
Might as well be Mr. Ed at that.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like I'm just waiting for him to talk and say something.
Exactly.
And we get that type of editorializing in the action lines, which always kind of frustrates me a little bit. Is like, the writer saying this is what the horse is supposed to be doing, or using dialogue to emote what the horse is doing. And I'm just like, I think that's a little bit too on the nose. Like, those are types of stuff you would have the writer and the director, when they're working together, convey, not necessarily on the page, but like just convey for the action. Like, okay, to the trainer, this is what we want the horse to kind of do. We got our notes for that. In the script, you would just basically you have to convey the frustration of the actor and the character interacting with the horse, where you don't know exactly what it's trying to do, and then let the horse's actions kind of put that together, because that's how you build the relationship. And one of the things that was kind of difficult for me to kind of believe in is that after he passes off a creek and they're getting closer and closer to Glendale and closer to this point, I'm not getting the sense that these two have actually formed a bond. And I know the writer tried to do that with the whole YouTube video of him learning how to mount the horse properly.
I found that interesting. I found that portion funny.
I thought it was amazing in that part of California, he was able to get a signal so that he could stream
Yeah,
a
no
YouTube
kidding.
video.
I would I would figure the founders or the union folks would somebody would have control of that at some point in certain areas, at least in California, because we're at Civil War and Wi-Fi is still open.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like going into Starbucks or something like that and getting your coffee and going sitting down and doing your thing on your cell phone or your laptop right there. But yeah, okay, it's there. I'll accept it. But yeah, I found that funny. That was amusing. Why it was there, who knows? But okay.
Again, I think it was
So
trying to build that relationship with him and the horse, but
right,
it felt weird because up until this point, the horse would actually lower itself so that he could mount it easier. And I'm like, that's a stronger relationship than him saying, don't lower yourself to help so that I can get on. It was just,
mhm,
it was kind of backwards. It would be more interesting if he never did that and he always needed to either get on a rock or a stool or something to get on the horse. And then
right,
as they went on their journey further, when he's about to get on, that's when the horse lowers, because then that conveys, oh, the horse actually likes him now and is helping him and cares a little bit about him, even though he's carrying him across several miles to Guernica. This script does incorporate a ticking clock, but it kind of washes over it because it says you have 24
mhm,
hours to do this mission. And, he's off at the first half of the script. He then meets Creep. They sleep for the night, kind of wasting those valuable hours for the story.
exactly. Yeah.
Gets up, makes it to Glendale very quickly. I mean, the pace of the script is pretty fast. Not breakneck speed, but it's pretty fast.
I
Uh,
think it's within 10 or 15 pages or something like that. With somewhere within the 10
it's
pages.
something into that because we're kind of like, unfortunately, because of all the dramatic changes that occur after like the 65 page mark, we can't really discuss that part of the story because that is your clencher, your closer, your catharsis, all
Right.
the climax and everything, and it stretches for quite some time. But
Yeah.
essentially, what ends up happening is that he does get to Glendale. He gets to the bookstore that he has to go into. He drops off the package, and then he starts asking for Emma, and the girl behind the counter doesn't know anything about that. Just
Right. She
goes
doesn't
through
know about
the
the package.
yeah, she
She
just
goes
knows
through the
about the
motions.
package, scans it, does her thing, and he's just like, oh, okay, I guess that's it then. And then he just kind of heads back out, and as he's heading out, there's an attack on Glendale. The founders and the Union are in the middle of the skirmish,
Hmm.
and he's just completely unfazed by it. He is zoned out. He hasn't seen the girl of his dreams. He hasn't had a chance to reconnect with her. And then, as he's making his way, Emma calls out to him and is like surprised to see him there.
Yep, like poof magic. She's right there. She's leading her battalion to war.
Yeah, she's the one
To
leading the,
war.
the battalion, and she stops to take a step away from the front lines and say hi to Neil.
Yeah, well, all hell is breaking loose. Behind them, they're having a conversation back and forth.
With great
Well,
contrast to the
explosion.
action, yeah.
Yeah, it actually worked. I did like that portion of the script. It does work. It works very well. And that's one of the only part that there are like three or four parts here that does actually work perfectly, and this one does. I mean, he had all the beats down perfectly. It was very very well written and very well incorporated in the script. So I mean, the connection that he makes with her ultimately, as it ends, he ends up on his way. So
Yeah, he finds out that he's been played by Jane Fonda and Sean Penn, which is
crazy.
I appreciated the irony there. Um, she didn't ask for him. She had no idea who was coming down. She has no idea what the mission
Correct.
was.
Hmm.
Um, he tries to win her back, and she lays it down on the cold hard truth, which is that she's a different person now. She's moved to Glendale. She's part of the war. And all this while rockets and explosions are going off in the background, and not too far in the background, like maybe 100 feet.
Yep.
And the comedy here, I think, was actually probably the best out of the entirety of the script, because you have these two people essentially kind of re-breaking up or reaffirming their positions with regards to their breakup, while this skirmish is occurring behind them. A skirmish that should be deafening to their ears, very distraction, difficult for them to keep their focus on. but it all means nothing because it's just these two in this moment, and it's kind of like a reflection or an inversion would be probably better of when the hero and the girl get together and they kiss while all the explosions are happening on behind them. This one is like, nope, you're officially declaring you're breaking up and never getting back together while all these explosions are happening behind them. And I'm like, that's different. You don't see that a lot. That's a good idea. I appreciated that. And
while the conversation was going on, you see two gentlemen setting up a rocket launcher while one guy's getting ready to fire it off in between their conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got a little bit of that top secret airplane type of nod going on there. And I think that was done way better than just talking about, Apocalypse Now, Star Wars, and all the other movie references that were not so subtly dropped up until that point. And then
I would have liked to have seen more of that.
Yeah, I would have liked that type of execution, that level of execution, that method that's what gets audiences excited. That's what gets them to. That one established like, oh, if this was the tone of the screenplay from start to finish, I think it would have been stronger.
It would have given it a Zucker and Abrams kind of framing.
Yeah.
I mean, it would work. It would work beautifully, and if he would have used more, whether this is a first draft, it seems like it is a first draft. If he were to go over it again and re-emphasize certain things like that and put more of that into the script, it would probably work a lot better.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I felt was bothersome. Is like, yep, this is the sweet spot here. It's like, this is your tone. This is what you got to do. Your serious conversation against an ironic backdrop. If that's what if that's what you had leading all the way up to this point and then carrying on throughout the rest of the screenplay, which it kind of does without getting into spoilers. But ideally what ends up happening is like, he's dejected and he basically starts his way back. But he forgets the book that Benjamin got him. So he has to go back and get it. So you have so that's kind of also a little bit convoluted, but it gets there. And then from there, that just escalates into him being kind of roped into a bit more of a conflict with the battle. And unfortunately, there's not much really we can talk beyond that because it's a breakneck speed climax, essentially. And from that point on is like, it'd be a disservice to the writer to kind of spoil it. But as I said before, yes, go out, seek out the script. Blacklist has it available. Other outlets have it also available with a elbow grease and some Google searching. You can find it. And if that still is difficult, yeah, you can just send me a DM or an email, and I can help facilitate that. I don't charge for those types of things because that's unethical. You just all I say is that don't be cavalier with how often you share it, because again, this is some creative works that are out here.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I will say this: it's kind of also thin. I mean, I like the simplicity of it, but it also feels kind of thin in regards to Neil's conflict, his goal. We don't really have an antagonist for the story.
Yeah, the only thing, his only motivation is Emma.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, even though they've broken up, he should be over it by now. Cut that out. But anyway, yeah, I see your point. And from then on, it kind of leans in toward Dr. Strangelove territory, and it gets a little weird, but interesting. And without giving anything away, which I'm not going to, that's basically where it kind of lands into that kind of Dr. Strangelove headcanon toward the very end of the film. So if you guys should check it out online.
Yeah, there's a level of absurdity to it that echoes that. I will say this: Dr. Strangelove is far more brilliant,
absolutely,
than this one. I appreciate the writer for swinging for the fences to try and cover that. And as I said before, it's got a Mobius strip type of storytelling to it. And if you're familiar with that method, you'll understand. But if you're not, I suggest you research it because again, I don't want to spoil it out for you. But that's a fun way to get it there. Yeah, I do think that this story was kind of a man versus himself story, where he's kind of his own antagonist, but at the same time, he's not doing much to really hold himself back in any regard, other than showering and cleaning his apartment and then writing and trying to get over that writer's block, which,
Exactly.
I mean, that's writer's block is, I mean, that's a thing I've seen it happen to a lot of writers, but I mean, your experienced ones, especially a guy like him who his character is defined as being a writer for over 10 years.
Right.
Usually, if you're writing that long, you kind of figured out your tricks on how to write something. It may not be the thing you want to write, but you're able to write something which gets you away from the writer's block
You're right. It keeps
obstacle.
your ebb and flow moving as you're doing it. You veer off a little bit into something else completely different,
Hmm.
but eventually you'll get back to what you started on in the first place. And that's what I do when I do my own thing. If I should happen to get writer's block at some reason, and I stop at a certain point, and I cannot move on from that point, whatever it is, I will go to, like, the second act or the third act and work on ideas until
Hmm.
that ebb and flow comes back, and eventually it does. It could hit in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping or first thing in the morning. Who knows? But it does eventually come back. It does not linger on for months and months and months. So,
No,
I
it
mean,
doesn't. That's basically just procrastination at that point. Because even for myself, whenever I'm writing, if I feel like, oh, I found a problem and I can't figure out a solution, if I can't figure out a solution in a reasonable amount of time, I then start to write another story, and then just kind of
yeah,
go from there. And because I've always got many of them on the go, every writer does. I mean, you don't just have one idea and then rely on that as a crutch. You got to diversify your portfolio, so to speak. And sometimes
exactly.
I'll be in a very heated scene where I'm like, oh, I'm having a lot of fun. All of a sudden, the problem presents itself as a solution, and it's like, okay, now I'm in the tug of war. It's like, do I keep writing the scene that I've got good momentum for? Or do I stop to make a note of that solution that I have to go back to there? That's worse than writer's block, because now you're just like, I don't know I can't write two things at the same time physically when my mind's now split in that direction. So then you have
Exactly.
to flip a coin. I usually just kind of go turn on my voice recorder, and I just spurt out the idea as much detail as I can, as quickly as I can, so that I can not lose the momentum I have on the written side of things, and then listen back to it and get into that one there. And that tends to work for me. Other people have their own methods. But yeah, this guy, like, this feels like a fresh writer's take on what a writer suffering writer's block has.
Most definitely, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
And
this definitely looks like a first draft of the script.
it does.
It's polished to a certain degree, but it does definitely look like a first draft. So,
Exactly. And I really do wish, like, he leaned more into the ticking clock part of it. If you set up you have 24 hours to do that, that's akin to a Chekhov's gun. Okay, great. Now we need to see what happens if this doesn't make it. Um, One aspect that's not really a spoiler, because it's something to be understood, is that Jane Fonda and Sean Penn did not send only Neil with this package information to the place. They've sent other people as well. It's too important
yeah.
to just send the one. We don't get anything to do with those other characters. I thought it kind of would have been a little funny if, as he was leaving the location, he encounters a couple of other guys that were
Right.
basically told the same thing. Like, yeah, my ex is part of the union. They asked me to come meet her or him there to deliver this thing. And then that's where he realizes, oh, this is something else.
Yeah, there's a collective of individuals that have been selected to go on secret missions to go deliver a package or whatever to whomever
Hmm.
when they're sent out to possibly different portions of the country. Just not just in California alone, but yeah, you never know. Since the roads have been basically blocked and they have them taken over with tanks and whatever, and they're all bordered down and shut down and armed guards and everything like that. The only other choice you have is to use that horse or use a bike or walk your way into that particular territory to do it. But I would have liked to met some of the other guys or gals that were also sent on those secret missions, so to speak.
Yeah, that was part of, like, the first draft issue. I noticed another one, which we talked a little bit before the show, is that the newspaper, the lead that they work for,
Hmm.
has apparently been around since before 1999.
Yeah.
And Neil and Jacob reflect about how then they launched it with their first edition. Um, they had no real clue what they were doing, and it makes you go, well, wait a minute. If they launched it with their first edition in 1999, and both these characters are in their 30s, and it takes place in the very immediate future, as it established in the script,
Hmm.
that's telling me that these two gentlemen launched this thing when they were like 5 or 8 years old.
Right.
And it's like, what is that part of the joke? Is that was it like just kind of a school children's thing that kind of ballooned over the years? But then they're like, yeah, after 9/11, a couple of years later, it became a political thing. It's like, well, now you got 10-year-olds writing politics. Like, is that the joke that they're getting at? Or did the writer take something of reality, incorporate it here, and forget that it doesn't line up with the ages? Are they thinking like 5 years ago was still 1998 type of thing? Which, again, a lot of people in my generation kind of forget that the 90s and the early aughts were actually a lot further away than we prefer to remember.
Yeah, I'm of the age of being around the age of 60, and a lot of what I've seen as far as politics is concerned and all that kind of, I've seen plenty of it myself as well in my years, and that is absolutely disjointed. I mean, okay, 10 years, the thing's been established for 10 years. He's in his 30s. It didn't mention how old Jacob is
Not
exactly.
really, but yeah, you got the
No,
sense they were contemporaries.
basically, yeah. And yeah, none of that meshed out.
Oh, you muted yourself accidentally.
Oh, did I?
Nope, now you're good.
Okay. But yeah, none of that works out. But I mean, it just to explain the story and okay, throw it. We're just going to throw out a date there, and this is going to be it, and just have the reader accept that for what it is, and just continue on with the story. Okay, great, it's there. It's pretty much like a lot of the story and a lot of the plot elements that are in the script here. It's just there to exist, to help try to move a story on with Neil and his journey in the horse and everything else. So yeah, they never did actually give a solid explanation for that. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the backstory as far as how they got the paper started, what made it so popular, blah blah blah. Underground papers exist here in Boston as well. They still do an underground paper here. It's called the Metro in
Yep.
Boston, and they do those over here all the time. And I think there's another one as well. Um, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, Los Angeles probably still has its underground papers. I'm sure certain cities in Canada still have their underground
Yeah,
papers.
Toronto's got a
Everybody knows.
few. Metro is actually a common one that's up here as well. Different type, kind of a sidestepped paper. Definitely independent, but has broad reach, oddly enough.
Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I get that stuff. I understood, but it'd be interesting. It's like, okay, so Jacob's the editor in chief. Neil's the writer, and
Mm.
they've established this. It's like, okay, it's established that this happened during, and they've been doing it for 10 years. Established that this happened during, like like if they want to do something political, it's like we started the paper when Trump got into office. Like there you go. That
Yeah.
makes more sense because that fits more in line, and you don't even necessarily have to kind of tether it together with the two sides because again, one thing that's kind of interesting is that the union side of things doesn't want equality of outcome, wants
Right.
everybody in them. It will accept you for who you are, but they used interesting communist language. And then the founders types of things want everyone to be the same at the end. They don't sugarcoat things, and
No.
we're told. I wish we were shown though, but we're told that they're very loyal to the Constitution. But it's like, well, their actions are clearly not because again, the Constitution says that all men are created equal. And they're not. They're claiming
Right.
otherwise. So yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, you've got a seed, kind of like the actual Civil War thing. It's like you've got a seed of something good there. Just let it germinate a little bit because all you need to give them is just enough,
Yeah, just a little smidgen
just
of
a little smidge.
how the founders were formed, and maybe a little collection of the founders at a meeting or something. That even the union itself, I
Yeah,
would have liked to have seen some of these military together, at least discussing their actions and what they're going to do. It would have been interesting to see both maybe like a member or a leader of the founders and the union come together and sit down and discuss these things and try and figure out a treaty, some way to stop the Civil War. I mean, at some point during this entire thing, even in any Civil War, there are always talks. Now, it would have been interesting if he would have incorporated a chit chat between the two leaders of both factions and incorporated a little bit more of that into the story and the reason why this thing started in the first place, because that
yeah.
wasn't explained either.
No, I mean the closest we get to a visual representation is the fact that Sean Penn and Jane Fonda are on the union side of things, And it's like, well, you really should give us something equally absurd on the opposite side.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
the fact that that wasn't done, I think, was kind of a missed opportunity. Because again, you're dealing with these two characters, which, based on their personal politics and based on the politics that are alluded to on the two sides, they are definitely not on the side you'd expect them to be.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm like,
Definitely.
that's okay if that's what you're going for there. If you're going to spin those presuppositions on their head, give us the opposite end of that. Like, who would be on the other side of that? Who is opposite? Would it be John Voight and David Mamet? Like,
Yeah.
give us something that doesn't quite, that we understand, but just doesn't mesh the same way. Doesn't mesh
Hmm.
as equally as how Jane Fonda and Sean Penn doesn't mesh with this one here. Because if you're
Right.
dealing with like a satire or a dark comedy, those
Mhm.
reflections are actually quite poignant, and they actually,
Right.
they further reinforce um, what's the rule that you have as a creator? Is like, always keep your audience safe, which means it doesn't mean like don't risk offense. It just basically means like every idea you present, they are willing to accept for the entertainment value and not get lost or pulled out of the story as a result of it. And
Exactly.
you, when you lean once far too far on one side or the other, or you leave certain information that could be important out, you kind of, you make your audience think about the wrong things that you're trying to get at. And I think that's
Right.
one of the aspects that kind of tips off that the script was definitely in its earlier drafts as opposed to being as refined
Mhm.
as it could be.
Yeah, he could have made a few more comedic efforts. I mean, if he really wanted to go into dark territory or go strictly into comedy, like I said, that Zucker and Abrams type kind of territory, he could have like put maybe Sylvester Stallone or somebody who is oriented in the action film realm as part of the Union generals and some of the leaders on that side.
Right.
And it would have been interesting to see these different classes of actors who have very different politics and different opinions on everything clash. Now, that would have been funny. I would have loved to have seen something like that. Now, that I would have laughed my head off. I would have laughed my head off
I
if he
think
would have put
that
something
would be
like that.
very funny. Part of me is also wondering, like, okay, you're sending this message to this store for this location. Part of me is like thinking, well, what's a funny meme type of joke that could actually land really strongly here? And I think that would be like, Chuck Norris hasn't picked a side, and whoever can convince Chuck Norris is going to win. And that's what his mission is doing, and that's the reveal of his mission, is that he's presenting a written argument, and the opposite side is also presenting their own, and it's basically like all Chuck Norris has to do is be convinced of which side to join, and then whoever that is, they win the war. That leans into the meme, the comedy. It might not be dark enough for the tone of what the script is doing, but that's kind of the direction that you really should go if you're dealing with dark comedy and satire. Is you need to kind of give something that's pretty ridiculous, but give a logic to it within the
Yeah,
rules of your
you
world. It,
have an 80 some odd year old Chuck Norris make the decision. He would have that decision to make to what side he's going to
right.
join. Is interesting. Now that is definitely a funny thing because he's been out of the limelight for such a long time, and considering his career and his action movies and the politics that were kind of mixed into those films, albeit comedic as well,
Hmm.
and a majority of them. But yeah, that would have been interesting. That would have been laugh out loud funny,
Yeah,
and to
you
see Chuck
can.
Norris come into it.
Yeah, there's so
Yeah,
many jokes you can make. It's like, well, what do we need with an 80-year-old? Well, Chuck Norris isn't really 80. Father Time's afraid to age him anymore. So,
exactly right.
that's the stuff you play into. You play into those type of jokes. But that might be for a slightly different comedy. But for this writer, for this type of thing, yes, I like the fact that we don't know what the mission is for. He doesn't figure it out. Cool. There's a joke there to the fact that couriers are just couriers at that point. But I think there just needed to be a little bit extra. I'm fine with the
Yeah,
last 30 pages and the climax and the whole thing that's going on with that. Uh, the introduction, I think there's a late stage antagonist that's introduced in this at that point, and it doesn't
yes,
really
sir.
land as well because it's kind of like
No,
you're restarting the story again, because now
yeah,
there's a new character that's involved, and now they've got a relationship, so that has to be established and redefined, and then you don't even get any of the juicy parts with it because now you've got to get into the actual climax of the story,
Hmm.
and it just
And towards the end of Act Two, he mentions something
mhm,
prior to the final 30 minutes here, or something about a character that's involved in that final 30 minutes of the film, which is probably some of the best part of it. I mean, outside of the conversation between him and his ex-girlfriend and all the fighting going on behind them, that is interesting. There should have been more of that, more confusion, more, hiding, more fighting going on while he's trying to figure out what he's doing, and then the whole reason and the MacGuffin of that message that was supposed to be delivered. That's a good idea. Is just leave that blank. I
mhm.
mean, either you're going to explain it or you're not. You're better off not explaining it and let the actions of the characters take over that portion of the film and that story in the first place, which I think was his idea. You just use that as a MacGuffin just to kind of move it on so he can go see Emma and so on. And the conclusion in the last 30 minutes can happen. So you have that protagonist. And like I said, the readers and whoever wants to see the script, they can go catch that on the blacklist. We're not going to explain that.
Yeah,
So
but I
I'm not
will say
even going to
this:
make it jump.
of a lot
Yeah.
of the cliches that were peppered in the first act, I was actually very happy that when Emma and Neil had their conversation, Emma was not in a new relationship
Right.
because she was
Yeah.
focused on the actual cause, and it's like that's who she was right now. Because so many others would be like, yeah, it's she's got a new man now or a woman, whatever it would
Right.
be, and he's based that would be his like no, there's zero chance now, but. They established the zero chance in the fact that she has moved to Glendale. She's part of this war. She is fighting for this. She's fighting this battle. That is what's more important to her than um, than Neil at this point. Here, they've made their decisions. They've gone their separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that was I liked that decision. I was like thinking, okay, that gives me a better mentality of what is at stake for her here. But overall, I didn't feel like him getting back with Emma would be satisfying either.
Yeah, the entire emotional journey of everything that's going on between his ears during that entire idea, during the whole journey itself, is just him making it from point A to point B, just so he can see her and they could reestablish their relationship, and it coming and hitting him. Basically, it falls like a thud, and it smacks him between the eyes, and he comes to that realization that this isn't happening. Okay, I am now free to go do what I need to do, and I could take that magic journey, that thing that he was dreaming about and talking about so much at the beginning of the script. There, being that journalist, that writer during wartime, writing those stories that could make him a legend in the future at some point, and that would further him on. That should have happened a little bit earlier, I think, maybe in the script, but it is what it is, and it's there. So
All right. Well, since that's as much as we can really say about this screenplay, Jim, what's your vote on this? Is this a green light or a pass for you?
this would definitely be a pass. Because it does look like a first draft script and it does need a lot of work. Um, in current day, I wouldn't see something like this getting greenlit anyway. Maybe, maybe by an independent studio, but I see a lot of work that would need to be done on it in order to make it something that could possibly sell. Considering the fact that the gentleman is already working more or less in the field right now. Who knows? We may see this in the future. He may decide to do some more work on it. May turn into a better script, or who knows? A studio may actually buy it and then pass it off to somebody else to do some work on, to put polish on it in the future. But I definitely would not greenlight it if I was a studio exec at this point in time. No,
I'm in
definitely
the same way. I think it's a pass for me. It's there's a fascinating concept here,
not.
some decent ideas thrown around, but it just doesn't feel properly refined.
Hmm.
Uh, it's too thin. It would need a lot of work. Now, again, yeah, this writer, he's written and directed a number of things. He's kind of had a little bit of a dry spell since 2020, but he's got connections, and I think he could probably self finance and make this movie on his own, which might be the
Right.
case.
He
But
could. I would see him bringing in another writer, perhaps somebody that does have a comedy background
Hmm.
that could bring a little bit more to the table as far as the script is concerned, and punch it up a lot, because that's exactly what it needs. It needs a lot of punching up.
I think it needs some punching up. I think the first act, the inciting incident, should probably come a good 10, 15 pages earlier. I think there should be some more conflict in the second act. The stuff with him and Creep was a good part. I think maybe keeping them together for a little bit longer, and them facing some challenges on their own, whether it be Creep saying that Neil's his prisoner that he caught, you know,
Hmm.
or something of that nature. Just have some fun with some gimmicks that you could use. Maybe even like pulling some old vaudeville type comedy at that point, because you're dealing
Uh,
with a tall guy and a short, a dwarf like character. Playing to some physical comedy and some shtick a little bit, to keep it dark. Find the other part too is like a lot of stuff was kind of easy for Neil. He just had to go there, drop it off, and then get out. The challenges he faced didn't come until the climax, and even then, those are more situational, external challenges as opposed to things that he had to get over or his own flaws to explore. So yeah, this, I mean, I would say this. It is a pass for me, but I still think I would still recommend people to actually check out the script because it does have a
right.
fascinating aspect to it.
It does most definitely. It is a funny take on
Oh, you cut out
what
again.
a
There you
Civil
go.
War in the United States needs to be. It just needs to be expanded upon and fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah. So,
A little more funny.
a little, yeah, ideally a little more funny for a dark comedy. Sometimes dark comedy doesn't necessarily mean subtle comedy. I'll put it to you that way. uh,
Yeah,
and in
yeah.
this case here, that's one of the things I was curious about. Is this might be, uh, yeah, this might be a little bit too subtle for what they're going for, and I think just a little bit of an amp up, not much, just to land the tone and keep that consistent. I think would be safe. So yeah, with that, I think that's pretty much it. Jim, please tell the people listening where they can find you if they've enjoyed you tonight as I have.
Well, I do have a YouTube channel, although I have not been a really good YouTuber and serving any subscribers. Don't have too many right now, but I will be on a subscriber drive in the future. Haven't put any content up because of business, as far as screenwriting and so on is concerned. But in the future, I will. And at some point, I will possibly do a live stream script. You are invited to join in. I'll let you know about that if it does, and when and if it does happen in the
Oh,
future.
wonderful.
And that's about it at this point. I'm just kind of concentrating on my next visit to Los Angeles as far as screenwriting jobs are concerned, and we'll see what goes from there.
All right. Well, that sounds great. I want to thank everyone listening live and on the replay. It's always a pleasure to discuss scripts with you. Remember, guys, if you want to leave your thoughts or comments on it, consider subscribing to the Patreon. Every Monday, I post what script it is we're going to be discussing for the week's show. And then you can leave your thoughts and comments, which we will leave out here as well. And if you want some of your own comments on the live side to be read, just send them in via Super Chat, because that goes to actually producing the show. I don't we don't need it, but it helps. If you want to do it, go right ahead. Otherwise, I'm just happy to have you guys listening. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank Jim for coming on this evening to discuss this. We're definitely going to have you back in the near future, as well as we go through all the hosts that we've got lined up. And remember, guys, every Saturday we are going to have a script to talk about. I've already planned it out to the end of the year. We have a Google Calendar, so everybody who's a host there knows exactly what script's going to be in the future. They're all ready, great to go, and we're looking forward to all the future conversations we have with Jim and everyone else that you have seen thus far. With that being said, I want to thank you all for listening, and never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.